Hi, I'm Angela Williams, and welcome to Voice Up for the Voiceless podcast. We're so excited that you've tuned in with us.
Welcome, welcome. I'm Krista Marshall, and we are co hosting today. We're super excited about our episode that we have today. Angela, you want to tell a little bit about who we have on and what's going on?
Yeah, and if you're tuning in for the first time, just to let you know, Voice Up for the Voiceless is a podcast that addresses the difficult issue of child sexual abuse and exploitation, and we even touch on ritual abuse. So, please like and share because this information it's such a stigmatized, such a silent issue, and we're really working hard to break the silence so we can help survivors who are out there struggling and suffering, and also help protect children, help protect the next generation of children. So we're super excited about the show today because we have a licensed professional counselor that is an expert in the field of child sexual abuse healing and recovery. And I'm going to let Krista just read a little bit about her bio. But her name is Kelly Redwine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll read a little bit, as Angela said, about Kelly and who she is. But before I get into this, she is a phenomenal human. She is a human that really cares and she is passionate. She has a deep passion for other people and for getting people healed. And so I think that that's why she's probably one of our number one picks for a therapist for those that have experienced sexual abuse because she understands and she empathizes. So, with that being said, let me read a little bit about the bio for Kelly. So, Kelly is a licensed professional counselor who works with adults to assist them in achieving a sense of health and wholeness. Kelly works with clients addressing issues including, but not limited to, trauma, relationship stressors, depression, anxiety, self esteem, grief, and life transitions such as marriage, divorce, I need to go. Not divorce, but just all of it. But career changes, deployment, or relocation. And Kelly desires to provide encouragement and support as individuals overcome the hardships of past and the present while realizing the strengths and abilities that lie within them.
Well,
So,
I'm excited to welcome Kelly on the show,
yep.
and we will bring her in now. Welcome,
Hey,
Kelly.
Really?
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on here today and talking to you guys.
Well, I understand that you work with a lot of survivors of child sexual abuse, Kelly. And can you just go in? We read your bio, a little bit of your bio, but just go into some of the training and how you've equipped yourself to serve this specific population.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, in graduate school, my research area was the gender differences between disclosures of child sexual abuse. So I did a lot of research
Mm.
with in centers that interviewed children after they'd had sexual abuse, had SANE interviews and forensic interviews, and looked at the differences of how long it takes girls versus boys to disclose. Because I know, as I'm sure in previous podcasts, you guys have talked about the statistics of 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys have experienced sexual abuse, but honestly, that number is much, much higher because of disclosure issues. And
Mm.
so we were looking at what differences might contribute to lack of disclosure between the genders. So that was the beginning of my um, passion for helping individuals with sexual abuse. From there, I, graduated and became licensed, and really have um, realized the strengths that lie within abuse survivors, but specifically sexual abuse survivors. And so I've gotten some training in different trauma treatment techniques and really work closely with my clients who mostly, like the bio said, are adults who have not disclosed their sexual abuse, not remembered it, or knew about it, disclosed it, but never got the help that they needed until they were adults. Because again, of many factors that I'm sure y'all have already talked about in different episodes, but that's kind of my journey. But I'm really
Mhm.
excited to talk more about that.
Yeah, well, Kelly, I've been real excited to have a licensed professional counselor on because really, so many people suffer in silence,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and our society, I think it's getting better, but mental health care is kind of at the bottom of the list when it comes to taking care of yourself,
Mhm.
and many see it as a sign of weakness instead of sign of strength. To really take that step. And I actually wrote a book just dealing with even how to choose a counselor because I know so many counselors don't even deal with child sexual abuse. It's not something that the patient that they want to take. So let's kind of start and help us understand how this trauma is different, how child sexual abuse is kind of different from other types of trauma or other types of grief in someone's life. And let's kind of start there.
Absolutely. Well, there are Oftentimes there's a grooming element in child sexual abuse. There's a relational experience that's happening at the same time of the abuse. Whereas with something such as emotional abuse or physical abuse, typically the person is not being treated very kindly or lovingly, as we said in
Mhm.
like quotations, but by the abuser. But with child sexual abuse or any sexual abuse, oftentimes there's a tug on the heart of the individual, because of the grooming process. Again, we all know that they're gaining confidence and gaining access to the child by being quote unquote kind and loving, and that is a complete shock to the nervous system because you start to intertwine love and connection with this abusive, very violating experience. And that is a very specific thing to have to heal from because God wired our brains to connect love with whatever kind of treatment that we're getting, which should be kindness, compassion, safety, all of those things. But when that is not there, those wires get crossed. And so that is one thing that sets sexual abuse, especially when it's in your formative years of childhood, apart from other types of abuse. And the other is that it obviously affects intimacy for the rest. It can affect intimacy for the rest of your life if you're not that's not addressed. Whereas other types of abuse don't necessarily affect sexual intimacy, for obvious reasons. So, and that can damage relationships. Even if you've buried it, if it's something you've dissociated from, it will come up in intimate relationships later, and can come out of nowhere. So that's another thing that might set it apart.
Mhm.
Wow.
I so relate to that. My abuser was my stepfather, and there was such a love-hate relationship
Right.
because he was the only father figure I had.
Mhm.
So I never really thought about it that way, but that's a
Mhm.
really good point.
Wow, wow. And so what do you see usually when you have an adult client that has gone through sexual abuse? What are some of the symptoms or signs that you see probably in their earlier 20s, kind of going out of young adult life into full adulthood? What are some of the things that people usually come to see you for?
Sure. A lot of lack of trust for obvious reasons, but a difficulty trusting individuals, especially of whatever gender they were abused by.
Mm.
Um, because we don't talk about it often, but women can be abusers as well. So a lack of trust, issues with and sexuality, transgenderism or homosexuality can be, and I'm not saying all the time, but can be a result of abuse in the way that you're kind of drawn to the safer gender. And so if you're abused by a male, you might be drawn to females and feel like that's a um, more of a romantic draw when really it's just you're
Mhm.
seeking safety from the gender that did not abuse
Mm.
you. The opposite might be the same, or you're trying to reject your gender because it left you vulnerable. So as a female, if you're abused by a male, you're going to reject being a female because the male gender might be stronger. And again, that's a generalization, but those are elements that I do see in some young
Mhm.
adults, especially currently, now that that is a more acceptable thing in a more
Yes.
and something that they can lean into. A lot of anxiety when your body has been violated that intensely. Your body starts to kind of live in a fight or flight state. So things that shouldn't really send us into something so overwhelming. You kind of have a hairpin
Mhm.
trigger to fight or flight, as well as a lot of depression because when your body is constantly needing, in fight or flight and giving you stress hormones, our bodies are really wise to conserve energy, and so there's no energy left for serotonin, there's no energy left for happy hormones, so those just kind of you stop producing those as much, and the fight or flight hormones take over, which leads to depression.
Mm.
So those are some things that are present in young adults. Sometimes hypersexuality as well, when you have, like we said, if your brain has been wired to see love from a very young age also equates to sexual contact, then you're looking for sexual contact to feel loved with other relationships in your life,
Mm. Wow.
um, as well.
So, what are some therapies that you suggest for survivors and help us understand? Because there's a lot of different therapies thrown around,
Yeah.
EMDR and uh, cognitive behavioral therapy. Help us kind of
Mhm.
understand. And I know you can't do a thesis on each one, but
Sure.
just kind of from a 32,000 elevation, this is the therapy, this is what it's bad, and what you've seen most successful with
Mhm.
survivors and helping them heal.
Absolutely. So, um, one thing you want to be looking for is something that deals with either the nervous system or what we call somatic therapy, which just means the body. Um, because with trauma, um, we can't talk our way out of it, because when a traumatic event happens, we literally have scans to show that our thinking part of our brain, the left side of our brain, shuts down, where the right side of our brain, where emotions and physical sensations are stored, lights up like a Christmas tree. You can put someone in an MRI machine or a CAT scan, or and trigger them to whatever trauma that they've been experiencing, and you'll see that left side of the brain dark, right side of the brain lights up. Meaning a talk therapy such as cognitive behavioral or reality therapy, or something that's dealing with the here and now and talking through thoughts, feelings, and emotions, is not going to touch the trauma. It might give you some coping skills to more dissociate from it, but it's going to come back up. So what you're looking for is something that is actually dealing with how the body process trauma. EMDR is great. I practice that often, and I've had such really great success with that. Something called brain spotting is something that a lot of people do find success with. I'm not trained in that, so I can't really speak to it fully, but it works with where the memories are stored in the brain and helping extract them so that your body can process them.
Mm.
Things like internal family systems, or IFS, that deals with how your body has compartmentalized your trauma at different kind of stages of your life, and kind of opening up those compartments so that you have more of an integrated experience with what you've been through. Different, and then there's a lot of other treatments as well that deal with somatic, body-based therapy,
Can
and
you
that
go
would be
back and just explain a little bit about EMDR? Because you talked about it, how successful it was, but you didn't really talk about what the therapy encompasses.
absolutely. So like I said, with trauma, the left side of your brain shuts down. So that's why when you're triggered again and again, you can't logically, you logically know you're here and now in 2025, but your body feels like it's back 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago in that moment, and you can't get yourself out of it. Or you know that you're safe, but you don't feel safe, even if you're home alone with your doors locked. And so what EMDR does after a process, the first part is helping you feel safe, giving you some coping skills so you don't feel so wide open and anxious all the time. But the processing stage is we find some where we make a timeline of some of the memories that we want to process, some specific events that happened with you. And then we use either eye movements, which is where it gets its name. EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. We use eye movements, where you look back and forth, back and forth. You follow a light back and forth across a little bar. Or sometimes that's a little overwhelming. We also have these buzzers that you can use. You hold in your hands and they buzz back and forth and back and forth. I've actually found that's a little bit less overwhelming for individuals. I use that more often. So you hold these buzzers, look at the light, and I ask you some specific questions about the memory. What are you noticing? What's an image, a feeling, a different, what's your body feeling like, different things. And then have you focus on that memory while you're holding the buzzers or while you're looking at the light. And in doing that, the back and forth movement, we call it bilateral processing or bilateral stimulation. It's waking up both sides of your brain. So that part of your brain, the logic that was shut down when you had the trauma, is now stimulated and woken up. And the emotions are kept online so you don't dissociate from them. So both sides of your brain are activated while you're thinking through this memory. And what it does is almost allow you to re-experience the traumatic event as if you had both sides of your brain online, as you should have, or as that would have been ideal when the traumatic event was
Mhm.
happening. And that way, it allows you to re-experience in a way that's not traumatic, so that you can put it in long-term memory and it doesn't stay up in short-term memory where it's been stuck because the logic hasn't been there, because logic is required for it to come to long-term memory. So, and how I like to explain it to my fellow believers, my clients who believe in Jesus, is, God says in his word that he wrote every day of your life in the book before you were born. And what the enemy does like to do is go into that book and make mark up, different experiences. God didn't write abuse in your book, but the enemy comes in and makes those abuse marks in those pages. And what EMDR does is it doesn't erase the experience, but it erases those marks that the enemy has made in your book and allows you then to live out the story that God already wrote, on your life before you were born.
Mhm.
So it kind of reprocesses and it takes it back um, to that original design. And again, it's not that it erases that. You're going to still be able to remember that memory, but it gives you a choice of when that memory comes up for you to be like, no, I'm putting that back in long-term memory. There's no reason
Mhm.
for me to remember that right now. God has redeemed that, whatever.
Mhm.
Instead of it just continuing to play without your permission.
It sounds
Yeah.
like you get put it in a file cabinet.
Yes,
You close the
absolutely.
door.
Mhm. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm just
No,
so it's so
I know
intrigued.
that you're so excited.
Talk to us a little bit about we're gonna have 2 separate sections here. So and you
Sure.
can pick which one you wanna talk about first.
Okay.
But I really would like to talk about disassociation because a lot
Sure.
of people don't really understand that. And I'd like
Mhm.
to talk about repressed memory.
Okay.
Because so many survivors have whole sections of their childhood just blank,
Mhm.
and they really question when memories do come up, are they real? They're by imagination. I
Yeah,
can't remember. So if you could just kind of bite off those two chunks of really huge
sure.
subjects, I know, but
Yeah.
they're so important for survivors of child
Yeah.
sexual abuse.
Absolutely. And I'll start with dissociation.
Mhm.
So that is our body's natural mechanism of protection. So it gets a bad rap, and of course, it could be damaging. But we have to start kind of recognizing that your body is doing that to protect you, and until you feel safe, that behavior is probably, or that really not a behavior, that automatic process probably isn't going to go away. Which is why therapy is great, because trying to deal with dissociation on your own, you may not have the tools to do it. But so your body likely, when the trauma was happening, knew that it was too much to experience in that moment. You were too young. It was too overwhelming. It was painful. It was all of these things. And so God created our bodies to survive. And as a survival skill, your brain stopped being in the present moment and went somewhere else. It could have been a fantasy land. It could have been dark, a blank slate where you weren't thinking about anything, but you went somewhere else. And you learned that that was a good thing to do when you were feeling overwhelming emotions. And it was at the time. This is a little bit of a different view on dissociation than you might hear other places, but truly it helped you survive those events. So we're grateful it was there when it was necessary, because you didn't have the support. Likely you didn't have, what you needed. Well, now as an adult, your brain has gotten trained to, whenever any high, extreme emotion, or even not that extreme, but a negative emotion comes up, your brain goes back to that dissociation. And now a dissociation could look like scrolling. Dissociation could look like overeating. Dissociation could look like drug and alcohol abuse. Anything that keeps your brain from having to be in the present moment and feeling any type of pain. Because when you felt too much pain as a young person, any pain as an adult can trigger that feeling of it being too much. And so, in order to heal from dissociation, we call it a felt sense of safety has to be present. And that usually takes healing from the trauma, or at least working through some of the parts of the trauma. Now, you don't have to be fully healed before you can help with dissociation, but working on the trauma and grounding yourself in the present when the present is healthy. So, having a practice of grounding, whether it's physical grounding, which we can talk about some ways to do that,
Mhm.
emotional grounding, spiritual grounding, for believers, that's really powerful, but something that helps your body feel safe in the moment so that your brain can go, okay, I can come back to reality. I don't have to go somewhere else, or I don't have to, scroll for hours. So I don't have to feel these emotions.
I find myself, I dissociated a lot through my abuse. My abuse lasted for 14 years. So I was really young. I was 3 when it started. So it became a pattern for me, and I just shut down. Like I,
Mhm.
I get really quiet, and I
Mhm.
just become very introverted and just really shut down when I dissociate. And it's hard to heal from that. It really is difficult because it is such a pattern. And when you have complex trauma over years, it was your go-to safety. Um, so with the dissociation, does that lead when you're dissociating to the repressed memories, or what is the connection between the two?
They're not necessarily connected. I think they work together. So with repressed memories, it is the memories were too extreme for your brain to process, so they don't get processed. But they live in your body. And so you still feel like there's something there. You still have the effects of the trauma, but you don't have a physical memory about it. So dissociation can be the first step to that, or it's just too much. You blank
Mhm.
out. And what I've found with repressed memories is often, so we always want to remember, like, it's unsafe. It feels unsafe to not know. We want to have the answers. Our human nature needs to have all of the answers. But when you are able to heal from trauma and your body is able to heal, it's not as important that like visually what happened to you. And then it also tell clients, whatever you remember about the abuse, we are going to treat as true. Now, is it something that would hold up in a court of law? Is it something that if there was a camera on the event, it would 100% look like what you're remembering? No. But as long as no one has led you and planted memories in your head, if there's something that comes up organically in your body and your mind, we're going to treat it as true, and we're going to work on it as trauma, because our bodies store memories, especially when we're younger. Our bodies store memories viscerally or somatically, and we don't necessarily have a picture with it. But because of how God created our bodies, we have our when we're remembering it, our brain wants to put a picture with it. So I tell clients, even if it's a purple cat, what image is coming up as you feel that physical sensation? And typically it's something like a door or a window or a person's face or something. And again, was that actually present in that moment? Maybe, maybe not, but that's how your body is trying to process that memory. And so we know something happened, and we're going to take whatever your body is feeling and process that. And so we don't want to dismiss those memories that are coming up. Again, whether they're 100% quote unquote true or not, they're what your body is trying to tell you. Your body's trying to tell you something happened.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Kelly. I think that you really just explained a lot of what we have no idea is going on, which kind of leads me to the question that I have. So, let's say we have somebody in their 40s, had
Mhm.
sexual abuse when they were 5, 6, 7, young, suppress the memories, don't remember much of anything.
Mhm.
How do they know? But they do know that there was some form of sexual abuse. Why should they get into therapy?
Yeah.
They don't feel like anything's changed in their life, or they're like, "Well, this is who I am," or "This is what it looks
Mhm.
like." Why should they get into therapy?
Yeah, because right around 5, 6, 7 or younger, your personality traits are being um, created, or you're
Mhm.
coming into those. And so you don't know what your personality traits are versus what the effects of trauma are. And so it would be really helpful to get into therapy to kind of uncover
Mhm.
what might be how God created you. Did God create you to be more introverted and quiet and a little more discerning? Because we often use discernment as a cover up for being scared and having
Yep.
trust issues, but more discerning. Or did the events that happened to you lead to you creating survival skills? And some people call them coping skills. I like to call them survival skills because it really did help you survive. And I'm grateful they were there at the time. But create survival skills that have carried on for 30 plus years and now are affecting you or have affected you in ways that either you're not admitting in relationships or things that be parenting, things like that, or that you don't know how to change. And that's
Mm,
another thing. Those things that you keep doing even though you don't want to. You keep yelling at your kids when they do something and you don't want to. You keep having difficulty with intimacy even though you want to not have that difficulty. So those things that you might not be connecting the dots as trauma responses likely are, and it would be very helpful because you have a good 40 more years that you don't have to live
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Kelly, did I hear you mention that you have a history of sexual abuse?
I don't.
Okay.
Not personally. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I am just curious because it's so difficult for survivors to find a trusted counselor. I mean, you're so vulnerable in that
Mhm.
place of needing therapy, needing help, needing healing. What are some of the recommendations you would give when someone's seeking mental health
Absolutely.
professional?
So definitely find someone who's trauma informed. Now that's a buzzword, so some people might put that on their profile when they're not. So you wonder trauma informed paired with some kind of specific trauma treatment training, and that should be on their bios or on whatever you're looking at. Because if you can be trauma informed and read all the books all day long that you want
Mhm.
to, but without, like we talked about earlier, without some kind of um, training or ability to work with how the body process trauma, you're not going to get very far. Um, there is you want a goodness of fit, so that you may need to try out a couple of therapists before you feel that safety in their office. But that's another thing, you want to feel safe and accepted. One thing you don't want to feel is judged. You don't want someone to be telling you the 5 steps that they need to take to get out of trauma, because um, that is just not going to happen, and that's not going to be good therapy. And so those are the things I would be looking for. I would steer away from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, anything that looks like it's short term or very thought based.
Mm. Wow.
That's really good
Mhm.
advice.
Sure.
Um,
And a good resource just to add is psychologytoday.com.
Mhm.
That is where a lot of therapists, it's kind of like a dating app. It's profile. They have all their profiles and you can narrow it down the area that you want to go virtual versus not, insurance if you'd like the ways of payment, but also trainings, specialties, gender of the counselor, because that might be important to you. Those
Mhm.
kind of things. And that's a way to see a lot of therapists in your area that fit your criteria. So you don't get burnt out having to Google and look at every single website that comes up. So that is also a good resource.
Wow.
So I know a lot of our viewers are survivors.
Mhm.
So can we circle back and maybe you give them some good practical tips that we talked about with triggering from a physical, emotional, and spiritual, those three levels, maybe 3 points in each that would help them. Give them
Mhm.
some good practical tools to walk away with today. Because sometimes, and I know this because I've heard it, but our podcast is triggering to people. They want
Sure.
the information, they want to hear it, they want to listen or view, and they get triggered, and I'm so sorry because this is just such a painful evil
Mhm.
in people's lives,
Yeah.
and there's no easy way through it.
Mhm.
It's just
Absolutely.
one foot in front of the other.
Absolutely. No, I would love to, because like we said, you can't think your way out of a trauma
Mhm.
trigger or an anxiety attack or, a panic attack. So I say you can't think your way out of it. You've got to feel your way out of it, which means we got to use your body to ground yourself or get yourself out of it. So there are some, the main thing, if you can. So caveat, breathing is the best kind of quick and dirty tip that I can give. However, sometimes that can be triggering. So if that is you, if you're listening to this and you're like, I've tried breathing and it makes it worse, then, ignore
Can I
what I'm
make
not
a point there with breathing?
saying.
I know I used to hold my breath all the
Sure.
time.
Yeah.
I would hold my breath till it was over. So when
Right.
someone would tell me to breathe, it's like I didn't even all I knew was to breathe in and hold it.
Mhm.
Right.
Like, the letting
Absolutely.
go was the difficult part.
Absolutely, and that's a great point because there's so much with, any kind of, choking, any kind of breathing and or being caught if you're, if someone hears you breathing, that kind of thing can be triggering. And so that's why I kind of give that caveat. If it's triggering, ignore it. We have other things you can do. But from a physical standpoint, when you're having a trauma trigger or an anxiety, a panic, your body is sending signals to your brain that you're about to die. And if you hold your breath, your body's going to send more signals to your body. Like, see, I can't breathe. We're going to die. So
Mhm.
by breathing and lowering your heart rate, you're literally physically sending signals to your brain that you're not going to die. You're safe. And one really easy thing to do, because a lot of times you can't do anything complicated in those moments, you need something quick, is to breathe without moving your shoulders. Keep your shoulders down and breathe, because that forces you, instead of this shallow breathing up in your chest, that's again called leading you to feel like you're going to die. Breathe deeply into your diaphragm, into your stomach. If you don't move your shoulders, you can try that. If you have to breathe without moving your shoulders, you're going to breathe in your belly. That's just an easy thing to do. Adding on to that, we call it square breathing, which is, you think of the sides of a square. You breathe, the left side of the square is breathe in for 8 seconds if you can. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit less, but try to breathe in for 8 seconds. The top of the square is hold it for another 8 seconds or as long as you can. Breathe out for 8 seconds. That's the other side of the square. And then hold it before you breathe back in. Hold it out for another 8 seconds.
Mm.
And you can do that for a couple rounds, which will really lower your heart rate, which will cause calm to come in. And the other one, which is a little bit more advanced, is breathe in for 8 seconds, hold it for 3, and then do another quick breath in, which I can, show you in just a second, and then breathe out. And that quick breath in helps calm your sympathetic nervous system in the vagus nerve, which is your fight or flight versus rest, that mechanism in your body. So you
Mm.
breathe in, hold it, and then breathe out. That second little breath in is really
Well,
important.
it's hard to
So
do.
yeah, and it does, and it really gives a sense of calm, and it's something to do with the carbon dioxide, not monoxide. That's
Yeah.
that's bad, but that your brain is feeling all that. There's science behind it, but that's just a quick trip, and those are easy to do. Or
Mhm.
if you're not triggered by it, those are easy to do.
Yeah.
The other thing we want to use your senses to ground you, because if you're see what you're seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing in the moment, you can't be in the past or, in your fears if you're actually present, as long as nothing bad is happening right here and right now. And so one thing, we want to deal with temperature. So holding a piece of ice, splashing cold water on your face. If you can, take a cold shower. Oftentimes kind of snaps your nervous system into
Mm.
into calm. And those are easy things to do, if you're at the office or driving, if you have something cold that you can put in your lap. Bonus points if you can have heat as well. So in with clients that I know have trauma triggers, we have a heating pad, and then they also have their cold drink or their ice or whatever. Both of those things kind of, again, they make your body really work to be in the present moment. Those are some quick things.
Wow.
And then the one other thing that I would say physically is kind of like we talked about earlier with EMDR, this bilateral stimulation, which gets both sides of your brain online, which helps you process things. It kind of builds a bridge between your logic and your emotion. Things like walking, because you're moving both sides of your body intermittently and you're really regulating. Some people like butterfly arms, where they cross their arms across their chest and then tap one after the other, back and forth, back and forth. That can be regulating. You could do it in your lap as well if you're at work or whatever. You can't if that's too much. Jumping jacks, swinging your arms back and forth, anything that crosses what we call the midline of your body, anything where both sides of your body are moving, is really regulating. So that would be the third thing that I would recommend as far as physical.
Wow.
Emotional?
Emotion. Oh, sorry. Mhm.
Emotional?
Yes, emotional. So emotional, once you can really, we want to emphasize, you got to calm your physical down before the emotional be most effective. But as emotional, if you're able to, if it's not triggering, journaling can be helpful, especially prayer journaling, because you're not focusing on what's happened to you. You're focusing on connecting either to yourself through the journal or to God, which I think God would be a little more powerful, because sometimes our self is deceptive, but to God through really processing those emotions as if you were talking to someone. So obviously therapy, I guess, let's put that down there too, but as the emotion, for emotions. But journaling can be very helpful, even if it's very short. Bullet journaling, art journaling, because that act of putting words or drawings or on paper also activates that left side of your brain where the logic is, which can calm you down. So that's one thing. So getting those emotions out. Being able to name your emotions, just really truly go, I am scared right now. And I'm scared because of what happened to me, but that's not happening in this moment. It is June 2nd, 2025, and I am safe. So saying that out loud, as silly as it, or as minimal as it sounds, can be really grounding, because you're hearing yourself say these words as if someone were trying to say it to you. I am scared, naming that emotion, that's nothing to be ashamed of, and yet grounding yourself in what's the truth in that moment. And in having a grounding verse, or we might get that with spiritual, but something grounding like a verse, a song, those kind of things. And then having someone to talk to, whether it is a therapist or just a friend who you don't have to tell the dirty details to, but just, I am scared right now. I'm having a hard time right now. And hear them validate, I know that it's hard, but you're going to be okay. That's more powerful than we give credit.
Can you talk a little bit about neuroplasticity?
Sure, absolutely. So our brains are, God created us to be able to change and heal and transform. And the more you do something, the more that you're able to, we call it, we have neurons in our brain. What fires together wires together. So the more you do something and the more it connects, you get these wired pathways in your brain, which is why when you've been through abuse, especially abuse that lasts a long time, you have had things that are firing together, like love equals sex, love equals sex, love equals sex, love equals sex. Well, of course, that's a belief that forms, and later on, but you kind of walk that out through your life. But you can unwire that. So the image of, I use the image of like a overgrown forest. There's a pathway that you've hacked out with a machete for years and years and years over here. And then there's this pathway right here that's completely overgrown with vines and whatever. So we've got to stop hacking this pathway out with a machete, stop cutting down those roots, which would be, for example, love equals sex, sex equals love, sex equals love, and start chipping away at this pathway. And so love is unconditional. Love is, God is love, whatever that thought might be. You're going to have to repeat it over and over, and it's not going to feel true or real because there's this overgrown pathway and you're dealing with one vine at a time. It takes some time, but over time, that pathway is going to get cleared. And this pathway over here is going to get overgrown because you're not going down it anymore. You're not walking that path. And that's an image of neuroplasticity, where our brains can change and transform even up until our 90, until God takes us home when we're, old and had a great life. Like, our brains are completely able to do that. we just get discouraged because it's not quick, and we sometimes we like those quick fixes.
Yeah, we want a quick fix,
Yeah.
especially survivors. We
Yes.
spent so long in the abuse, and healing is hard. It's a hard
Mhm.
journey. It's not
It
easy.
And
And it's
I do
not
wanna say something to that with, even with survivors often feel shame because they might binge eat, or they might turn to alcohol, or they might turn to a substance of some kind, or a relationship. And honestly, because of how hard life has been, and because of what I said earlier about your brain not really creating those happy hormones anymore, or happy chemicals, because of all the fight or flight, you're looking for quick fixes of what we call dopamine, which is that
Mhm.
feel good chemical that you have when you eat an ice cream cone, or when you drink a glass of wine, or have sex that feels good, that in the moment might feel good. Those dopamine hits are almost you're a desperate attempt to make you feel okay. And so kind of like what you said, we want those quick fixes, and that is a quick fix
Mhm.
of dopamine. And so I want to take away the shame from those behaviors, because the quick fixes are what you're tired. And it makes sense why you want that. And that's where trying to have the patience and longevity, and knowing that that's what you're craving and that's why, versus this long-term, work. It's okay to crave that, but this work is going to be the more beneficial, the more powerful.
Yeah.
S
We're
I have
good.
just monopolized this show, and I apologize,
No,
but
it's fine. I know that you had some great
this is such
questions.
well,
Yeah.
this is such my heart
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
survivors to
Mhm.
hear from her, because so many fear
Yeah.
counseling, fear opening up this can of worms.
Mhm.
Am I strong enough
Mhm.
to
Right.
go through this? Am I strong enough to talk about it? Am I strong enough to disclose? Like, I mean, I've been there. Like, I know. And then it's so hard to fit counseling into your schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I do have a question.
Mhm.
And I think that would be probably maybe one of our last questions that we have is what would you say to a survivor for them to continue with therapy if they're not seeing the immediate result?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it took a long time for your brain to get wired this way, and it's going to take some time for it to get unwired or rewired in a different way.
Mhm.
Do discern whether the counselor is the right fit. If you've been going for, I say, 3 to 5 sessions, and you feel nothing, not even a relate, like there may not be some results as far as behaviors or thoughts, but if there's not even a relationship, you don't feel maybe not excited, because sometimes it's hard to come in, but you don't feel that, okay, I feel better when I leave, then
Mhm.
maybe look into finding a new counselor, because there's so many of us out there. Not all of us can be the right person for everyone.
Right.
So that's really important. We say the relationship with your therapist actually is, research shows 80% of the like you can predict 80%, the relationship predicts whether it's going to be successful. It's not the
Mhm.
treatment
Wow.
techniques, it's not this, it's not that. It's the relationship. Now that other 20% is important too, because we want you to have the techniques to get better and your body to heal, but that relationship is so important. So make sure the relationship is there. But if the relationship is there and you still are like, man, I'm still having panic attacks, man, I'm still, talk to your therapist about it. See if there's more active things you can do, but also understand that your body is healing, and I don't say good therapists, but therapists who understand trauma know that this is a slow process. And that's the
Mhm.
other thing, I wanted to mention, Angela. It is hard to think, oh my gosh, I have to go in and my first session, I have to talk about this thing that I've told one other person my entire life. And
Mhm.
that is not the case. If your therapist is asking you to tell all of your details of your trauma, to run, because
Right.
it's so activating. Really, I say take the first, when I train, I'm a count supervisor, so I train other therapists how to deal with trauma and those kind of things. The first 3 sessions are just get to know you. Now we're going to give you some coping skills. We're going to give you, but we're not pushing any kind of, even, and if you're asking me to, because sometimes, kind of, Angela, like you were talking about earlier, wanting to get it all done is a trauma response, wanting to be perfect
Mhm.
at it. Or, I'm going to just throw it all out there. It's a trauma response. You're wanting to do it quick because it's too painful, and that's not how this works. And so just know that slowness is actually protective. It's helping you actually heal without, you know, you know, dissociating from some of the
Right.
pain. Um, and as long as the relationship is there and you're feeling like you're safe in that room, and you're getting bits and pieces of what you need, then you're on the right track.
Good.
Amen. Amen. So we always end our podcast with a voice of inspiration, and your whole show has been an inspiration to
Mhm.
survivors. It's really taught me a lot. But if you could just speak to that survivor out there that's really hurting, maybe has chosen some dysfunctional behaviors to cope, just really give them some encouragement. So we'll let you just finish with those words of wisdom,
Yes.
words of
Well,
inspiration.
absolutely. In my experience, survivors are the most resilient individuals I have ever met.
Mhm.
And the resilience is hard to see when you're in the middle of the pain that you're experiencing, but it's still there. And so I would just encourage anyone that healing A is 100% possible. It is 100% there for you.
Mhm.
And when you are on the other side of it, the resilience that you will have that is head and shoulders even above your peers who haven't experienced this trauma will be astounding and will help you do the things that God has called you to do.
Mhm.
I love the verse that, where the enemy meant for evil, God is used for his good, for the saving of many lives. And sometimes that means doing something, like Krista, you do, and Angela, you do, which is saving lives through actively talking about it. And sometimes that means just going on to have a family who is healthy and whole and not abused and
Mhm.
generations that the curse has been broken and that saves many lives in and of itself. So really remembering that this dark period of time, I call it's a hallway, not a dead end. So even if you're walking, just keep walking through, get the support that you
Mhm.
need. Because the resilience that, the ability to deal with whatever life throws you after this will be, I won't say easy, but you will have all the tools that you need. And the community that surrounds you, if you are able to find the courage to disclose and to get that healing. Also, is the community of survivors is one that's unmatched with support and
Mhm.
love and compassion. So
Amen.
yeah, absolutely.
Kelly, it has been our honor to have you on today, and I
Same
cannot wait
here.
for this interview to air. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful.
We have to have you on again. Thank you
Yeah,
so
there was
much, so
this wasn't
much.
enough time for
No.
sure, but just very grateful to you and thank you. And I know
Thank
that our
you.
viewers are going to be so blessed by the information that you've shared.
Well, thank you for having me. This was great. I love talking about this, and it's my passion to help others heal. So thank you so much for having me today.
And we'll put your information in the link if someone wants
Okay,
to reach out
great.
personally.
Mhm.
So
That's perfect.
I am just in awe of the information today, of the show today. I know that you've been blessed by hearing Kelly, and we are just so grateful for everything that she has shared. And mental health is so important. We can't stress enough that your healing journey is so important because you deserve to be happy. You deserve to live at peace. You deserve to have joy. And I can personally give testimony that it's not easy, but it is worth it.
Mhm.
It's definitely worth
Mhm.
it.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much for being with us today. And we want to thank Mesmerized Media, Kelly Redwine for being on again. We will put her information again on the screen if you do have additional questions. Psychology Today, we'll make sure we put that referral on there as
Yeah.
well if you're looking for a therapist. But again, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you
Yeah.
again.
I'm Angela Williams.
And I'm Krista Marshall.
Thanks for viewing.
We'll see you later.
Bye bye.